Hello everybody and welcome back to another video on my channel. Today is October 5th, 2024, which means we are exactly 31 days from election day. It's pretty crazy to think that election day has come this quickly, and it's going to be a great month of content, and I appreciate all your guys' support. And please continue to stick by for the next month of election analysis and my next couple predictions. But in today's video, since we are 1 month away from election day, I will make my updated 2024 prediction between Donald Trump and JD Vance and Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. If you are new to this channel, please subscribe, like my video, share all my content with all your friends, and put all your suggestions in the section below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and let's begin on today's video with the national vote between Trump and Harris. Right now, Harris does lead by 2.2 percentage points on average. She does lead in most polls. We have one Trump plus 2 poll and then one tie by Quinnipiac. Very surprising because Quinnipiac is very known for being overestimating for Democrats by up to 8 points according to 538. The recent 3 polls have had it at a very tight race, and the last 4 busts before that had Harris up by a comfortable margin. However, let's just compare this to back in the day in 2020. October 5th of 2020, 1 month before the election, Biden was supposed to win the popular vote by a whopping 8.5%, and he actually ended up winning it by around 4 points less. He won it by 4.5%. He ended up winning the Electoral College 306 to 232 by winning the states of Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona by a combined 44,000 votes in these 3 states together. If Trump would have flipped only Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona, he would be the president right now, and we would have a completely different talk about this election cycle. Shifting to the states that matter a little bit more are going to be the top battlegrounds. And in the top battlegrounds, we have the states of Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Right now, on average, Trump leads by 0.1 across these 7 most important battleground states. He's at 48.4%, and Harris is at 43.4%, 48.3%, sorry. And this is very good news for Trump because he has never led in these averages in any of the cycles that he ran for president. In 2016, he never led, and in 2020, he never led. Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton both had huge leads on him. But let's start to fill this map now, and we're going to begin with the safe states for Harris, and these are the states that are going to vote for her by 12 points or over. California, Oregon, and Washington on the West Coast. Hawaii. We have the state of Illinois, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, DC, Maryland, Delaware, Connecticut, Vermont, New York, and Maine's 1st District, all in that safe column. 167 electoral votes that are locked away. 100% chance that these states are going to go for that party. Maybe not 100%, but 99% chance. And then for Donald Trump, you'll have a lot of states as well. We have Alaska, Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska except the 2nd. We'll get to those later. Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, South Carolina, Iowa, and Ohio. And the states of Iowa and Ohio in the last election were 8 points respectively for Donald Trump. These are 2 states that have been trending heavily towards the Republican Party. In 2012, Obama was able to win both these states by high single digits and even double digits in 2008. So these are states that have completely shifted. And despite the nation shifting over 2 points to the left from 2016 to 2020, these 2 states actually trended right. So they trended right compared to the country. And since I do expect the national popular vote to shift at least 2 points back to the right, and I expect it even higher, I expect around a 3 to 4 point shift, and that would put these states easily in the safe column from around 8 to 12, and that's what I expect. And these are going to be the safe states, 167 to 148. And let's go right now to the likely states, this shade right here of blue and red, and these are states between 6 and 12 points. The first state for Harris would be the state of Colorado, and the state of Colorado is a state that Joe Biden won by 13.5%. Checking these trends from 2016 to 2020, we see all across the state very, very large amounts of blue arrows pointing left. Like, for example, Summit County was 12 points more Democratic. You have all these counties around Denver, around 11 points, 7 points, 8 points, 11 points. So the state as a whole universally trended to the left heavily. Hillary Clinton only won by 5. And we expect it now to fall under that safe column, but still a double-digit margin for the current vice president. And then we have the state of New Mexico. And New Mexico, for the first time in a long time, since I don't even remember how many years, it actually was voted to the right of Colorado. We have Colorado at D plus 13.5, and we have New Mexico as at around D plus 11. And this state didn't move too much from 2016 to 2020. And that's mainly because of these Hispanic trends that are so universal across a lot of the country. You see Texas right here, and that has moved a little bit into the state of New Mexico here. And it's fairly interesting to see what's going to happen this time. But since the polls are not very good enough to put this in the lean column, I'm going to leave it in a likely column on that lower end between 6 to 8 points for the vice president. And then the final state will be the state of New Jersey. And polls in New Jersey have this race being tight. Polls in New York have this race being tight. In New York, back in 2020, we had Joe Biden win the state by 23 points. Polls right now from New York Times, from Siena College, from Emerson, have this race only at a 13 to 14 point margin. And that'll translate directly to New Jersey. New Jersey has seen some polls that are a lot closer than usual. And since this state already is not too democratically favored, being less than D plus 16, I do expect it to fall around D plus 11, D plus 12 range. So it will be in that likely column just barely. Going now to Trump's likely states. First of all, the state of Texas and the state of Florida will be voting very similar to each other, since in 2020 we had the state of Florida trending many points to the right despite the state trending to the left. Trump was able to win the state by 3.5 percentage points, and the southeastern part of the state and a lot of the middle and the panhandle trended to the right heavily. Especially we have Miami-Dade County, which is the biggest county in Florida, 22 points more Republican, and we had Osceola County. These two counties are very, very heavily Hispanic. And then we have Texas as well. The reason why Texas ended up being still a 6-point margin for Trump was because he was able to have humongous trends in the Rio Grande Valley, a very Hispanic area. And so it was able to repel against many of these suburban and urban trends towards the left. And I expect this time that these will especially carry out even more. I expect Texas and Florida to be around R plus 8 to R plus 10. And we actually have some early data out of Florida, and we're going to check that out right now. If we go to the state of Florida, we do have some early data on votehub.com, so it's very interesting. And this is probably the most accurate that it could get. And if we see here, the total votes by party, 41.6% Democratic, 38% Republican. And you might say, this is good for Democrats if you're not sure how this metric works. But we have to remember that early votes, especially absentee votes, are mostly Democratic controlled. And comparing it to 2020, if we check the 2020 election and if we check the mail-in ballots returned, 45 to 31. So around a D plus 14 difference. And now what it is, a D plus 3 difference. And so Democrats have collapsed considerably in these early votes. And this makes sense because the state as a whole, the registration went from D plus 100,000 in 2020 to now R plus 1.1 million. So I expect this state to trend even more to the right and be in that likely column. But the final district that'll be in the likely column will be Maine 2nd. This is a district that Trump won both in 2016 and 2020. There's no reason why he would not win it in 2024 by a likely margin as well. And we're now to the lean states. And right now, having the likely states, and these are the states that right now I see as the floor, the least that these candidates would get, 219 for Trump, 196 for Harris. It is almost impossible to see both Trump or Harris getting less than these electoral college votes you see on the screen right now. But going into the lean states, first we have Harris. The first state is Minnesota, and Minnesota for me under Biden would have been a tilt state, but after Harris came in, she was able to gain a few points. Walz is the governor of the state. I'm not sure his approval rating, but I think he's generally relatively popular in his own state. And the polls in the state of Minnesota are looking not that good for Democrats, but good enough for them to be able to win the state in the lean column for me. He does lead. She does lead by 4.7%. And it is a state that I do expect to continue trending to the left compared to the country because of these Minneapolis shifts. So I will keep the state in the lean column around 2 to 5 points for the Democrats. And then we have the state of Virginia. And Virginia is a state that I did expect from 2020 would continue to shift left, but we've seen a lot of change from them. The early votes, although it's not available on here, it is available on Twitter. The early votes are looking really, really bad for Democrats. And that doesn't mean that Democrats are going to lose the state. It just means that the margin is going to be a lot closer. Checking these trends from 2016 to 2020, you would probably disagree with me. I mean, and I would too. I was thinking after 2020, this state is pretty gone for Republicans, but we've seen a very drastic change in these polls as well. And if we check the polls in Virginia, we have Harris only up 4.8%. And we do have some pretty good polls in here, like University of Mary Washington, that do have Harris only up by 2. In 2020, they had Joe Biden up by double digits. And we can see here Joe Biden ended up winning by 9.4%. I do expect Kamala Harris to pull out this state, but it will be probably half of that margin, around 4 points for the vice president. Nebraska second is a very heavily left-trending district. I expect her to be able to win it, as well as the states of New Hampshire and Minnesota. Both will be around 2 to 5 percentage points, maybe on that higher end, because the polls in both of these states are looking very good for Democrats. We do have her leading 7.4 in the state of New Hampshire. And in Maine, there has been much polls, but the latest one does have her up by 9, which is the same margin that Joe Biden won. Both of them win. He won New Hampshire by 7. He won Maine by 9. But since these states are much more elastic than a lot of these other New England states, there are a lot of registered independents. And I do expect these states to move to the right, but not as much as many of these other states that I will go over shortly. And now we're going to go to Trump's lean states. The first lean state that I have on this map is the state of North Carolina. And North Carolina is a state that he won in 2016 and in 2020. In 2020, he won by a little bit less than in 2016, but it was not that much worse at all. He did not lose too much in the state. He gained in the northeastern and southeastern parts. He lost a little bit in the Charlotte metro area. However, it was not as much as I would have expected. And this is a state that I do expect him to be able to pull off, especially since he lost a popular vote by 4.5 in 2020. There'd be no reason right now why he would be losing the state. And the polls also agree with me here. He is up by 0.6%. But even though he's up by such a small amount, he only is down in 2 polls. He's up by most polls between 1 and 2%. And the consensus really in the state is that Trump is probably going to win the state by a lean margin. Just remember the polls back in 2016 and 2020 had the Democrat candidate win both times. And we do also have some early voting out of North Carolina, which is very good for us to take a look at here. Obviously, very, very small numbers. But from what we have now, we see here that the requests are 36% Democrat, 24.7% Republican, and 40% other. Going to the 2020 election, we can actually compare this and see that in these requests, we have Democrats at 46, Republicans not even at 20. So once again, a huge shift. Democrats down a full 10% and Republicans from 20 to 24. So Democrats are down considerably. And that should be a worried sign for them since they are looking to win the state as a whole. And on my map, it will stay in that lean column, as well as the state of Arizona, which I do have right now in the lean column. Originally, I had Arizona in the tilt column, but since these polls have Trump up by 1.4%, the RNC chairman, Mike Whatley, actually came out and said that Arizona is actually outside of the margin of error. And this is a state that I do think Trump is doing very good. He's at 48.9%, which is almost impossible for her to make up if he is reaching that 40%, 49% threshold. And although we don't have early voting just yet, I do think that it is going to favor Republicans. And he does lead in the state right now between 2 and 4% on my map. The rest of these states now will be going to the tilt column, which means that the rest of these states are between 0 and 2% for each candidate, which is basically in that toss-up category and could go either way theoretically. First of all, I'm going to start with Nevada. And Nevada right now I see as a tilt state for the Democrats. And that's mainly because despite most of these polls shifting towards Republicans, the polls in Nevada are looking decent for Democrats. And usually Nevada is a state that has a little bit more accurate polling. And Kamala Harris has been expanding on her lead the past couple weeks. So right now, using all that data, I do think that she will just narrowly win the state. But it is 50-50 in my opinion. I could see it going other way. I do see some very good registration for Republicans in the state, so I could be wrong here. But once again, we are still a month out, and I have to make a decision on Nevada. Right now, I do give it to Kamala Harris very narrowly. But in the state of Georgia, I do feel more confident about this one. I do think Trump's going to win Georgia by around 1 to 2%. And I only even have to look at the polls, and Georgia is the most accurate state in terms of polling. 2016 and 2020 were spot on to the T. And I do expect Trump to win by this exact margin. He leads in every poll apart from one where Harris leads. And I do think he is going to win the state. This is the state that Joe Biden only won by around 11 to 12,000 votes. He was able to get massive turnout in the Atlanta area, on the Atlanta suburbs and all those exurbs, mainly because of suburban turnout among African Americans and women. I do not expect it to happen this time, and we do not see any data pointing to that happening this time. I expect turnout to go way down in all of these states, which means that Democrats will not get the enthusiasm, while Republican enthusiasm does seem to be still higher than expected. But now we have Trump at 262, we have Harris at 232, and let's go to the Rust Belt states. The first state I will fill out on this Rust Belt trio will be the state of Pennsylvania. And I do think Pennsylvania right now is looking very good for Republicans. We have some polls out of Pennsylvania that show it as a dead tie. The past 4 have showed either a tie or Trump up by 3. We can remember back in 2020 that Joe Biden and Clinton were supposed to win by high single-digit margins, and that's the theme with all these Rust Belt states. The polling in these 3 states is absolutely atrocious, so I do expect the margin of error in all these states and the polling miss to be the highest out of all of these Rust Belt states. And we do have some voting, some early voting out of the state of Pennsylvania. Let's go back to 2020, and usually this is a state that the requests and the returns are very favorable to Democrats, 62.9% to 25.4%. And we can go to Pennsylvania and check out the numbers we do have now. We do have the requests 61.6% and 27%. So Democrats are down a little bit and Republicans are up just a little bit, not as much as back then. We see the request Democrats at 930,000, Republicans at 408,000. So Democrats are down a lot more than Republicans. So we're going to end up seeing now what's going to happen in person. Our Republicans are going to be able to make up that deficit. And since they were almost able to make up this deficit in 2020 with such a larger difference, I think this time they will definitely be able to make up a 500,000 deficit. And this is a state that is going to be very down to the wire, but I do think right now Trump will win this state by a tilt margin. I do feel the same about both Michigan and Wisconsin. I do think they're going to vote a little bit similarly. I do think Wisconsin is going to vote to the right of Michigan, but I do think this time around Pennsylvania could possibly vote to the right of Wisconsin. And usually we're not very used to seeing that, since Wisconsin is the most Republican out of these 3 states. Trump only lost by 20,000 votes, and he lost the state of Pennsylvania by a lot larger, 1.2%, and then Michigan by almost 3%. But Wisconsin and Michigan are states that I do not see Kamala Harris having much of a road appeal to. This state was down to the wire, and just the fact that it was 20,000 votes, and since it's trending so far to the right, and we see polls in the state of Wisconsin and Georgia being so tight, 0.8% for Harris. And that should be a warning sign for Democrats, because look at this. Back in 2020 and 2016, Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton were supposed to win by 6 points and 5.5%. Wisconsin is known for those extremely bad polls for Democrats. Same thing with Michigan, where Joe Biden and Clinton were supposed to win by huge margins. And Trump is really surging in these 2 states, because we see here a lot larger polling for Kamala Harris. She was looking really good in Michigan, but the past 4 polls, 3 of them have had Trump up. And even Alice Intel here, which is a very favorable pollster and one that was very accurate in 2020, has Trump up by 4 points. And so back on our map, these states of Wisconsin and Michigan are both going to be toss-ups that slightly lean towards Donald Trump. So I will put them in his column in that tilt margin. And that will be the map. We have 306 for Trump, 232 for Harris. This is exactly the same as Trump's victory in 2016, so it's very interesting. It'll be fairly surprising if it does be the exact same map, but once again, I wouldn't be surprised if Trump wins Nevada, for example, or if Harris is able to get Michigan. These will be very close states nonetheless, and this is going to be my map. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe, like my video, put all your suggestions in this section below, and I will check you guys out in the next one.